Fixing air traffic control because, well, it's a mess. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy blames some of that mess on his predecessor, Pete Buttigieg. Plus, new details on Friday's Alaskan summit between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And why was a convicted felon released mere months into his 14-year sentence only to get arrested again for holding up a bank and stabbing a mother of two in the process? It's called shock probation, and I will tell you all about it. Those stories and more today, Wednesday, August 13th. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. Senator Adam Schiff is a well-known critic of President Trump, but newly released documents claim to show just how far he'd reportedly go to poo-poo the president. When Schiff was a member of the House of Representatives, he was the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee. From that perch, a seasoned intelligence officer alleges that Schiff approved leaking classified information during the Russiagate probe with the aim of smearing the then-new President Trump's image. Yes, we are still talking about 2016. Here's White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt yesterday.
A whistleblower who is a Democrat, a career intelligence officer who worked for Democrats on the House Intel Committee for more than a decade, repeatedly warned the FBI in 2017 that then Rep. Adam Schiff had approved leaking classified information to smear then President Donald Trump over the Russiagate scandal. This is obviously a bombshell whistleblower report.
The source also says that Schiff called a staff meeting to share his plan to leak classified information, suggesting it would be used to indict the president. The whistleblower says they objected, but were told by another person in the meeting that they wouldn't get caught leaking the info. Now over to the absolute mess that we call air travel in America. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is revealing more details about his department's plan to fix the air traffic control system. A big part of Duffy's plan is to put high-performing students inside the nation's control towers. He told our own Miranda Devine on the Podforce One podcast that his predecessor, Pete Buttigieg, lowered the minimum score on the entrance exam for the Air Traffic Controller Academy. Here's some of what he said.
What happened was they had a substantial washout rate, 30% plus.
Demoralizing for the kids.
Because they couldn't do the work, right? That was number one. And then it took so long. If Miranda, you take the test, you pass it, you got an 82%. It might take you 2 years to get your seat in the academy. What we're doing is if you're at 98% of that test, 94, you are going to take the top slots as slots become available. So we're getting the best scores in the academy first. And what we've done with that is we've lowered the washout rate.
Duffy also outlined plans for modernizing the technology used by air traffic control, and I cannot overstate just how bad we need that. The current system getting planes on and off the ground at the nation's airports is woefully out of date, like bell bottoms out of date, wake me up before you go out of date, who shot JR out of date. You get the picture here. Every time you fly, air traffic control is utilizing technology from the 70s and 80s. The replacement parts often have to come from eBay, a forum that didn't even exist when the tech first became standard. Now, Duffy says the modernization, the training, and the staffing will make air travel safer for passengers. And you can check out his whole conversation on the latest episode of Podforce One, which is now live, and bonus points if you listen to that while you're on an airplane. Now to a terrifying Kentucky kidnapping. A mom and her 2 young children were abducted last week, and cops say the culprit is a career criminal who forced them at knife point to help him rob a bank. And that knife was then put to use. $20,000 later, the kidnapper allegedly stabbed this mom in the abdomen and fled the scene. Now, he was arrested shortly after the incident, which is good news, obviously. But what makes this story so maddening is that the suspect, 32-year-old Armin Langford, had been locked up and sentenced to 14 years in jail just last year after being convicted of almost a dozen robbery charges. So what in the world was he doing out on the streets? Well, a judge appointed by the state's governor, Andy Beshear, granted Langford something called a shock probation after he'd served just 5 months of that nearly decade-and-a-half-long sentence. Well, okay then, color me shocked here. These shock probations are meant to give certain offenders a second chance after, in theory, a short time in prison shocks them so much that they leave behind their life of crime. I do not think it worked this time. Now to our big story, the latest information on President Trump's trip to Alaska to meet with Vladimir Putin this Friday. I mentioned yesterday that the president is trying to manage expectations for the summit, leaving open the possibility that he may very well walk away without a resolution. Well, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt did something similar on Tuesday, calling the meeting a listening exercise, during which President Trump hopes to get a, quote, better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this war to an end. But what does Russia want from this summit? They are, after all, the invading nation. Well, our own Caitlin Dornbos has been digging into that, and she joins me now. So, Caitlin, let's start there. What does Russia, or Vladimir Putin more specifically, want to take back from this summit? He's not getting complete control of Ukraine. That's been clear since the start of the war. So what do you think he's going to be okay with?
I think that his desires really haven't changed from the start of the war. As you mentioned, he's not going to get that, but he's still going to try. He's going to try to use his FSB, former intelligence skills to try to convince the president that there is a reasonable reason for him to obtain all of his original desires, which was largely to take over all of Ukraine, which the president just said the other day he believed is still Russia's desire. But I think a more capable, a more reasonable thing to understand would be Trump would really see this as a win if he can get President Putin to the table with President Zelensky to actually talk one-on-one. Because what's really clear here is that nothing's clear. We've heard reports that Russia wants all of the eastern part of Ukraine where the fighting has been happening. He wants a freezing along the front lines. He wants to take all of Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast, or states. He even including territory, about 30% of which that he has not been able to capture even since 2014, when the conflict began and the fighting began in that specific region. So these are a lot of red lines that are going to be difficult to find any kind of resolution here. I think what is critical is that Putin needs to be ready for a ceasefire before going to the table with Zelensky for real negotiations. While he wants the entirety of Donetsk and Luhansk, he is not going to be able to get that before a ceasefire is in place, because you cannot make a ceasefire conditional on things that would give Ukraine leverage to begin with, to go into when they do try to make those deals in a formal setting to really end this war.
I mean, the fact that even going into it, we still have this idea, like you said, that Putin is going to try to get everything that he wants. It's almost delusional to think that you're going to go into peace talks not compromising on anything. And it's notable that, of course, Ukraine isn't involved at this state in the negotiations. And obviously, President Zelensky has his own hopes for what comes out of those talks and how it could potentially lead to peace. So what do you think the goal is from the Ukrainian side as they watch from the sidelines?
They want to get a real clear understanding. Just like President Trump has said that he's going into this meeting to gain clarity on what the Russian position is. He wants to be able to understand whether or not Putin really does have any desire to make any real concessions to go into this war. Ukraine is also wondering the same. I was speaking to some Ukrainian officials today, and they were saying that they're still really unclear on what Putin wants. That's because a lot of the messaging that has been put forth is coming through intermediaries like the special envoy Steve Witkoff or other Russian outlets speaking about what Putin wants. But really, they need to hear directly from Putin what Putin wants.
You know, you had mentioned that President Trump being able to get Putin and Zelensky at the table at the same time to negotiate would be a real big win for him, certainly geopolitically. But, you know, as we also noted, the White House is calling this whole thing a listening exercise. And we know that President Trump prides himself on being a deal maker. The man co-wrote The Art of the Deal. It's kind of his thing. So is it fair to assume he also doesn't want to leave empty-handed? Is there anything that you think on top of just getting the negotiations for all three of them in place that President Trump would want?
I think President Trump really wants a ceasefire before peace negotiations. And that goes back to what he's been saying throughout his presidency this second term. He has said no agreement can really take place unless a ceasefire is reached. And I've been talking to different officials that could look like something less than a ceasefire entirely, perhaps maybe a halt on all air strikes. So you would see Russia stop striking those civilian centers that are just breaking everybody's hearts, stop launching aerial assaults, and Ukraine would do the same. Instead, they would continue their fight with more traditional weapons such as artillery.
That is it right there. That is it. You saying those things that really break our hearts. It's so critical to remember that there are people on the ground there whose lives are at stake, who've lost loved ones and family members for years now. So it just is so important to keep that at top of mind as we look forward to Alaska on Friday. Our Caitlin Dornbos, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now from our friends at Page Six. Yesterday, I listed a zillion reasons that Swifties thought Taylor Swift was making her New Heights podcast debut this week. Okay, it was like 6 reasons, but still, the Swifties, they were right. That is not the big news, however. The real headline here: a new era is upon us. In a teaser for the episode, the global superstar announced her 12th album, The Life of a Showgirl. And because the marketing team behind Taylor, and the Kelsey brothers for that matter, are aces, GQ dropped an interview with Travis that gives us a rare behind-the-scenes look at their love story. I don't even know where to begin with all the quotables from this article. There's this one. When there is not a camera on us, we're just two people that are in love. That's precious, even though they're still really, really rich, so not just two people. Now, Travis also said that their A-list relationship, and I quote, kind of just took the F off. That it did, my good man. And Kelsey suggested that being a pop star isn't all that different than being a Super Bowl winning football player. Oh, wait a minute, that's actually not relatable at all. I don't even know what that means. But he kind of clarified it by saying, quote, she will never tell anyone that she's an athlete, but I've seen what she goes through. I've seen the amount of work that she puts on her body, and it's mind-blowing. 149 shows in her Eras Tour, 5 continents. Yes, that does absolutely track. Do you love these two together? I do. I met Travis years ago. He was kind of doofy, but he was really, really sweet. The Taylor, Travis, and of course, Jason Kelsey, he's there too. That episode of the podcast of New Heights drops tonight at 7 p.m., which reminds me, did you notice that in the teaser, Jason Kelsey just fermented his beard? I mean, it looks great, but I think that's the real news here. And finally today, do you use those magic sponges? Not the ones from Seinfeld. The ones that clean anything with just water? I do. I use them all the time. I love them. I regret to inform you I have some terrible news. They might be killing you. Scuff marks on your new sneaks? Magic sponges. Mildew in the shower? Magic sponges. Caked on grease on your oven door? Magic sponges. Trillions of microplastics being shed into the environment each and every month? Magic sponges. A new study claims that these things, which are made of a lightweight but durable plastic called melamine foam, act like ultra-fine sandpaper, scraping away stains and dirt. But if you've used one, you know they tend to break apart pretty quickly. They kind of just disintegrate in your hands. And researchers say when they do, that plastic doesn't just vanish. The study says one sponge sheds 6.5 million microplastic pieces per gram of sponge. That's a lot. Based on Amazon sales alone, they think about 1.5 trillion particles are released by consumers each month. And I'm not done. Microplastics go everywhere. Scientists found them in human hearts, brains, lungs, livers, kidneys, in breast milk, everywhere. The tiny plastics are believed to damage cells, mess with our immune systems, and also have been linked to increased risk of heart attack, stroke, and even some cancer. So, well, that sucks. That sucks. That's all I can say there. I literally wiped down my kitchen cabinets and my New Balances 2 days ago with this nefarious sponge. Okay, so maybe we can't have a nice magic sponge to do our dirty work, but we can still have some nice things like this time that we have together every day, Monday through Friday. That's nice. Liking and subscribing to the New York Postcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube, also nice. And the New York Post in print or online, that's nice. Or at the very least, it's definitely snarky. And really, isn't that even better?